Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Anyone have any experiences with the paranormal while on a trip, vacation? Tell your story. This is a true story, so sorry if it's not exciting enough. This is about something me and my brother call the Radio Man. My grandparents lived down in this big lake community in Florida, and my family would go visit them during breaks. Anyway, my brother and I would always just go out and explore the woods and shit. They always warned us about snakes and alligators and shit, but they knew and trusted all the people who lived there. So one day, we're just clambering through the swamp trees, and we hear someone talking over and through some trees, so we go to investigate. There was a man in a big coat hunched over in a clearing, talking to himself. But he talked funny. His voice kept jumping to different inflections and accents as he talked. When we talked about it later, my brother said it reminded him of when you scan through a bunch of radio stations and only get a few words from each, almost like a big weird sentence. Hence the name, Radio Man. The guy heard us or something, because he turned and looked right at us. And he was all messed up. The best way I can describe his face is a lizard face that got put through a blender. And he started walking towards us and saying hello, hello, hello in his creepiest voice. And we just booked it. We were far from home, so we just ran together for like 5 or 10 minutes and then hid in a big bush that you couldn't see through. But even though we hid, we were excited and scared and were basically yelling to each other like idiots, saying shit like what was. We were only in the bush for like a minute before it happened. The thing started climbing into the bush with us. It wasn't even saying anything, it was just like softly moaning and grunting with the same weird voice. We shit ourselves and started screaming and both just shot out of the bush and literally ran as fast as we could all the way back home. Our grandparents and parents, and to this day they think we're full of shit. Looking back on it, it was probably some sort of deformed disabled guy who didn't know any better. My brother suggested once that maybe it was a guy who got shot in the face and it screwed up his brain, which would make sense. But who knows, right? It was still horrifying. We never went adventuring in those woods ever again. I still wouldn't.
I went to a Tim Hortons camp when I was 10 in Kentucky. There were 4 of us in the cabin and we each had a room with a bunk bed. My bunkmate was this girl named Katie. They forgot to put her name tag on her bed and she didn't really go out and do stuff at the camp. She seemed really sick. I think it was some Kids Wish Foundation thing that they even sent her. I remember it seemed like she should have been in a wheelchair, but she wasn't. I used to sit on the bottom bunk with her and talk about this boy Tyler from B4, which was the boys whereas we were G4. But she was always really sad. She didn't really eat either. I imagine she couldn't keep it down. I used to write home to my dad about her. Because she kinda creeped me out, but I wanted her to have a good time and none of the other girls would talk to her. When we were all getting ready to leave camp, Katie just sat in her bed and I asked her if there was some way I could talk to her. She said she wasn't leaving. She had to stay longer than everyone, and there really wouldn't be any use sending her anything she wouldn't make it home. And again, I assumed that she got to stay the whole summer because of the Children's Wish Foundation, and she didn't have much time left, so I got a counselor to take a picture with her by the window and said my goodbyes. I sat on the plane with another girl from my cabin who lived in Canada too. I asked her if she would have wanted to stay all summer like Katie, and she had no idea what I was talking about. I told her Katie was staying all summer, and she gave me this funny look and put her headphones on to watch the in-flight movie. It was some Pixar movie. I didn't develop the film in my camera until a few years later, and the picture I took was just of me standing by the window in the room I shared with Katie.
I kind of have one. On road trip, staying with some relatives. Aunt collects teddy bears and has filled the house with fancy bears of all kinds. I am sharing a guest room with my grandma. The room is literally full of wooden-faced bears, like pick-related. They completely cover dresser and floor except for a path around the bed. Also worth noting, they are all facing the door when we enter. Aunt is weird and OCD-ish like that. Not bothered cause grandma also has lots of bears and dolls. We go to sleep. Wake up in the middle of the night. Look at bears. Their heads slowly turn to look at me. Not smooth movements, jerky and sharp. The faces are distorting. Almost static like sound. Freak out quietly and turn to grandma. She's already awake and is staring at the bears too. Neither of us falls asleep all night. Next morning we're convinced it was a bad dream or imagined or whatever. I realize the bears are definitely staring at the bed now. That's a 90-degree change of angle. There's literally 100 bears of varying sizes and they are all facing the bed. Neither of us saw anyone enter or leave and none of the bears are otherwise disturbed. We stayed in hotels for the rest of the trip. Apparently weird stuff happens fairly often there. My uncle found bones in his front yard and blames it all on that. Says it's a burial mound. I don't think so though because it's way too close to the ocean, possibly a random murder or someone who simply died of exposure. Very old bones according to the state and my uncle can't dig up anything there without an archaeologist or something present.
There's a story I heard back from when I was an exchange student in Osaka. I went to the house of a friend of mine and he had a grandfather which was in some sort of coma. My friend couldn't tell me what caused his coma and said his mother told him to just ignore grandpa. I was sleeping over at my friend's house one night during summer vacation and during the day I had gone to a festival and watched the fireworks etc. I had been drinking a lot during the day so at night I had to get up to use the toilet. Grandpa's room was just down the hall and the door was open. I heard some movement like sheets or something. I poked my head in and saw the old man rolling around in his bed. He then crawled out of bed shaking, terrified and muttering things. Some of the things were hard to make out for a non-native speaker. I recall he said things like "Where am I? Help me, I can still hear it," Knock's head. He legitimately looked terrified, the type of terrified where you can hardly scream but just quietly wheeze out words. I closed the door and got back in bed and could not sleep for the entire night. I didn't bring it up with my friend because I didn't want to pry in case their grandfather was insane and I didn't want to imply any disrespect by saying anything paranormal was going on with their grandfather.
I live with my father in a place with hundreds of houses, a majority of them more or less abandoned. I have lived here since I was a kid, so about 15 years. When I was a kid, I'd guess around 5 years old, there was a man living in the house right across my father's house. His first name starts with P, so let's call him that. Anyway, P was in his late 70s. He was a retired war veteran, and he was very good with herbs and botanics and other odd things. He was also a junk collector, not very extreme, but he did have a lot of weird stuff, like dozens of ceramic trolls outside his front door and stuff like that, you know, weird stuff. He also had the biggest apples in his apple tree. Rumors said P used his feces as fertilizer, but that's probably not true. However, P barely spoke to anyone. People didn't really know much about him either, but my father was an exception. Since he is good with people and whatnot, he managed to small talk with P every once in a while. He always told me to stay away from him though. Years passed, and P died when I was around 11 years old. My father told me about it the same day. A couple of days later, P's mother and sister came here to clean out the house and pick up what's theirs. P's mother was really old, as you may already have realized. This made it hard for them to clean it out, and they didn't feel like doing it. On top of that, they were naturally sad about P's death. This is when they offered my father to buy P's property for a small amount of money. They just wanted to get it over with. And so my father did buy P's property, including the stuff inside his house. He would then spend weeks cleaning that shit up. Man, all the weird things he found there. One of the things he found inside P's house was an electric scooter. The two-wheeled kind, kids sometimes had them, which he just carried and put in our storage room. After he cleaned the house, he spent time applying new wallpapers and placed a new floor to freshen up a little. He then gave me the house to use instead of a room. Yes, you read it right, I've had my own house since I was a kid. It is only 2 rooms though, and right in front of my father's. The following weeks, mysterious things started happening around here. Things would seem out of place, and strange sounds could be heard at night. My father jokingly said it was P's ghost, and it made me rather uncomfortable at times. But I manned up and just didn't think about it that way. Some nights when I went out to take a piss in the bushes, I could feel as if P was watching me from somewhere. I don't know how to describe this feeling more than I just did. Months later, my father went on a month-long boat trip. I stayed at my mother's house during that time since I didn't want to come with him. A couple of weeks in on his vacation, another neighbor called my father and told him our fire alarm went off, and my father told him where the extra set of keys were, and our neighbor went inside to find nothing out of the ordinary. When my father came home from his vacation, he went to turn the water back on, the electricity, etc., and then he opened the storage room. Inside was the electrical scooter with a completely burned out tire and a huge hole in the fat carpet on the floor. This was extremely weird, since the scooter can't possibly be started without the key in the ignition. My father is an educated electrician, he knows this kind of shit. The scooter hadn't even been test driven since he removed it from P's house. This is when my father really thought something paranormal was going on about P. He told me, and I freaked a little, but it didn't stop me from sleeping in my new house though. Various small spooky things continued to happen, and both my father and I were convinced that P's ghost was messing with us. We looked through all of his old stuff again to see what kind of things we could find if we take a second look, and my father found a small sign with P. Wicht on it. Wicht was P's surname. My father decided to take the sign and attach it to the house, as a sign of respect of some sort, or just to honor the old man. He did, and immediately after that the haunts seemed to stop. None of us got that feeling anymore. I didn't feel creeped on when taking a piss in the bushes outside my house. I just felt like I wanted to share this with you, X.
I was on vacation in San Diego with my mom, brother, sister, and her boyfriend. I was the oldest at 21 and the youngest, being my brother, was 13. Mom had fallen asleep in the hotel and we were all awake and excited 'cause of the beach and shit. My sister's boyfriend says he knows a cool beach, so we all decided to go. We drove around for about an hour and finally pull up to this sketchy-ass beach. It was about 1 a.m. and completely foggy. We walked up to the edge of the cliff overlooking the beach. There was a long boardwalk, almost looked like a bridge, that went out into the ocean and disappeared in the horizon. On this boardwalk/bridge were about 30 grungy Asian fishermen just continuously pulling in fish and crabs. We had to walk past all of them to get to the winding staircase that led down to the beach. I obviously already had a bad feeling about this but decided, what the hell? Blah blah blah. We get down to the beach and sit for a while. All of a sudden cars started pulling up above us. About 20 or 30 skinheads got out of the cars and started walking straight for us. I hear in the distance, yo, who are these guys? I know that some shit is going down and I have my 13-year-old brother and my 18-year-old sister with me. My sister's boyfriend and I stood in front of my siblings waiting for the confrontation. They just walked right past us and lit up a trash can. We booked it out and never went back. I remember the convo I had in my head. Just pleading to them they let the rest go and to do whatever they want with me. Top 5 scariest things I've been through in my life. Also tried to track down the beach we were at and still can't seem to find it.
Not even an abduction and possibly not even paranormal, but here you go. Be me, on vacation in hometown. 11 p.m., playing Street Fighter with a buddy at my mom's house. Blazing in my room. Dog starts to act very strange. He is just standing right next to the wall, staring at it like a statue. Won't move even if we call him. Go outside to smoke a joint. The night is insanely bright for being 11 p.m. Huge cloud in the sky that's constantly flickering with blue and orange lightning. It's far closer to the ground and more cumulus shaped than any other cloud. Dog suddenly starts barking from inside. Wakes my mom, whose door opens. We rapidly put out the joint and open the door so we can pretend we were just outside playing with the dog. This story is obviously BS cause he was inside when he woke my mom up. She doesn't seem to care. Despite being a very grouchy lady who doesn't like being woken up, my mom is acting weirdly ditzy and cheerful. Follows us to my room and so does the dog. I'm now praying she won't smell the weed. She doesn't notice the obvious smell. Still acting strangely trance-like and silly. Keeps commenting on how big my friend has gotten since we were kids, marveling at how strange his fight stick, Street Fighter controller looks, etc. Eventually goes to bed. My friend and I go out again later to finish our joint. The flashing cloud formation is gone and the night seems very normal. My dog is back to normal. My mom is asleep. There are reasonable explanations for all of this. Texas has strange weather during the spring and I've definitely seen some bizarre clouds in my time. My mom, I later learned, had recently started on antidepressants. And my dog was probably just high. Still though, a weird night.
The only paranormal events that I can remember involve UFOs. I grew up in a city called Chiclana. It is located in the southwest of Spain. In the summers we would sometimes get really hot nights, so hot that sleeping in your room without an AC was impossible, so in order to combat the heat at night we used to take a swim in my pool and sleep outside, sometimes on a hammock, sometimes we would throw a bed on the grass by the pool, or inside my father's Nissan Navara. We would sleep with our feet towards the front of the car with our heads popping out on the back, looking up at the stars. I really miss those nights. So one night during the summer vacation me and my mum laid down on a bed by the pool, we like to look at the stars and try to spot satellites in the sky. After a while we were watching this satellite come in from our right. I talked to my mum about how many stars there really are out there, wondering if there were planets like ours out there, and if so, how many. If someone out there wondered the same. After a pause, I turned to her and said, wouldn't it be nice if they just showed us that they are out there, letting us know we're not alone? Like if something like that satellite stopped right above us and let us know that they are out there. Then that exact thing that I had wished for happened. The bright white satellite flew towards the middle of the sky in a straight line at the same speed that satellites usually appear to move. Then when it was just above us, it stopped dead on its tracks and laid motionless for a few seconds. When the light appeared to turn red, with beams shining in all directions, I've always explained it as looking like the Japanese naval flag. It shone these red beams, which rotated around the middle red light. It shone a very short while, but long enough for me to sit up, look in awe at the light, and then my mother, who laid on the bed with no expression, bathed in the red light emanating from above. I looked back up and the light turned back into a bright white dot and resumed its motion in the sky just as it was before. I sat in complete awe, looking at the white dot until it disappeared. I turned to my mum and asked her excitedly what the hell was that, asking myself how it was possible to have happened instantly after I mentioned it to her. She just laid there, with no real expression on her face, and just said, yeah, it was very pretty. I was so taken aback by her lax response to what just happened that I asked her what she saw, just to make sure we saw the same thing she did. But she did not seem to care at all about it. I ran inside my house to tell my dad what just happened, and he too did not seem to care much. He simply told me that it must have been incredible and kept watching his game. I've never forgotten this experience, and whenever I have talked about it to my parents they remember the event, and now they seem more intrigued about it, but they have a harder time remembering it. They say it's mostly because I've retold the story to them. My mum has become annoyed that she cannot remember it clearly and wish she could, but she feels that my account of the night is correct. I'm probably never going to know what the hell that thing was. I have thought about military flares, iridium satellites, planes and helicopters, but I can't convince myself that it was any of those things, the weirdest part being that it happened immediately after I wished for it to happen. I've even considered that I dreamt it all and convinced my parents through the years that it was real, or some other psychological excuse. I just probably will never know what the hell happened. Sometime later, during the spring, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was raining heavily outside and my room was warm and cozy. I remember feeling very good, at peace and safe. I laid in my bed not thinking about anything in particular, thinking about the rain and how nice the night was. I looked up towards my window, which was just over my head, behind the bed. I was looking between the blinders that hung over the window and the glass. I was really calm, admiring how beautiful the raindrops looked, dripping from the iron bars of my window, bathed in the light from the streetlight, listening to the raindrops hit outside. I laid there looking at the dark orange glow of the water drops for what now feels like a long time. When I suddenly realized that something was very wrong about those water drops. I could not put my finger on why it suddenly felt wrong, but it was enough for me to sit up on my bed, pull the blinder towards me and take a closer look. I realized that the water drops were not bathed in any streetlight, there were no lights outside, there was no rain, and they were not drops of water falling from the iron bars of my window. They were above the house, moving up and down just above my windows, about 30 to 40 meters above it. I don't remember anything else from that night, but my dad does. He remembers being woken up in the middle of the night, hearing a weird sound from the door. When he went to investigate, he found me. I was sleepwalking and was trying to open the door to our garden. He went up to me and asked me what I was doing. He said I was in a hurry and seemed frustrated that I could not open the door, that I seemed upset. When he asked again, I told him that I have to go outside, there is something I need to do. He asked what it was and he said I got very upset and kept repeating that I must go outside, that I had something that I needed to do. He pulled me away from the door and took me to my room, where I just fell asleep immediately. This story I have not told as often to people, in part because I feel that it can be easily explained as me sleepwalking and dreaming the whole thing, especially after my previous experience. This story also makes me anxious and uncomfortable. I even had to hold back some tears when I told a friend of mine recently. I know what it sounds like and I do not enjoy that thought. I've convinced myself that it probably never really happened, but I still get anxious when I remember it. A few years later, I was spending a weekend night with a new friend I had made in school. We were at a skate park late at night, talking about this girl we both had a thing for, and we were swearing that we would not let a girl get between us. We were no more than 13 at the time. We were in an industrial zone of town, walking to a gas station after leaving the skate park when I turned back to face him and saw a large triangle, about 60 or 100 meters long in each side, flying straight towards us. Without me saying anything, he turned around as well. We both stared at the thing in silence, a black triangle, darker than the night sky, with 3 lights at each corner, and a larger red one in the middle. I flew above us at what must have been at most 300 meters. It glided through the air in a weird way. It looked like a prop being moved in a video game editor, completely silent, and not particularly fast. We could hear the slight breeze and the faraway traffic by the gas station, but no sound whatsoever from the object. We barely started discussing excitedly what we just saw, when we spotted a dark gray-shaped disc, moving slightly faster than a fast car over the industrial zone, before blending into the sky. I'm not sure what happened. It was moving and then it just disappeared. It did not even take off at great speed. It was just gone. We went back to the skate park to tell some kids what we had just seen. They too saw the silent triangle, but no disc. We were all dumbfounded about the size and the weird way it flew. This too, I've tried to rationalize it. We did live only 30 kilometers from an American naval base with a large airfield called Rota, but the way it moved, the absolute absence of sound, and the height that it flew at makes me skeptical that it was some US aircraft. Why would they fly a secret aircraft out of some naval base in Spain and fly that low over at least 3 cities if it flew in straight line from the airbase?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.